with you now until the end.
Good evening and welcome to Conspiracy Cafe. We'll be with you now, we'll be with you to the end, and hopefully the end will be a long, long time away. We got a tip at the radio station today that's just totally turned the fabric of this show inside out, backwards and forwards, and should shake this continent from the Gulf of Mexico to the North Pole. And we'll be getting into that a little later in the show because I had things lined up in a format to present material anyway. So Conspiracy Cafe, your host George Freund, there's nothing like it. You're never going to get intelligence like this anywhere. The CIA desk should be watching very, very, very closely because we know who's flying the false flag at the Olympics. And we know very, very well about some of the popular items that end up in the news, the codes, the secret numbers that the Illuminati read, just like you would probably read the tar and nicotine content on a cigarette pack. And unfortunately, I know how to read that stuff now too. But one little issue that I'm going to start out with is just a small local issue. Just something just to show you, how the politically correct gods are not guarding the flock as well as they should. There was a small little incident with a friend of mine involved in a dispute in her apartment building, and let's just say it just drives one to great limits to control oneself sometimes. But there's a woman who's being regularly beaten there, and this is just something that's the status quo. We have to accept it. You have to be woken up all hours of the day and night to hear maniacal screams, cries for help, abuse that you just can't determine. And my friend who's a little challenged, intellectually and mentally has to listen to this day in and day out. I've heard some of this myself. There's rampant narcotics use in the building. But see, that's okay because the political correct gods are sleeping. Violating the Narcotic Control Act is all right at this address. A new family moved in. They have a small child. They use narcotics too. They try to say my friend is a threat because she complains about the narcotics use, but that doesn't stop them from using narcotics and putting a small child in a car and driving away and going on the streets in various forms of impairment. But that's okay because the politically correct gods don't apply there. So we can only say that it's a hissy fit between my friend and these people that live at this residence. One night there was a scream. My friend inquired about marks on a woman's body, which should be something the politically correct gods say is copacetic. She goes to the door to inquire. There was some sort of confrontation. The courts will probably determine how that ends up. My friend was arrested and put in jail. I bailed her out. Then, of course, as a surety, I get to return to her address to pick up materials. And, of course, the victims who use drugs on a regular basis and seem to be extremely dysfunctional are saints and gods in the politically correct world, aren't they? We have a man who beats his girlfriend and a girlfriend who takes it and likes it, and that's okay. Inquiring is a threat to society and demands that someone should be put in jail. So anyway, I attend at the residence. I pick up the stuff. And I forgot something and it came back. The victim and her boyfriend were outside, sitting on a bench. When I left, they left. And when I returned, I noticed something on the bench. If we could zoom in on our screen there, my friend. And I'll blow that up a little bit for the benefits of the politically correct gods, if that can happen here. Let's see. Okay, there we go. And what we have there on the bench is a giant, big-ass pair of shears. That's what they were waiting with when I made my trips to that building. But of course, you call the police and you report, someone has a weapon in Toronto. But that's okay. At that address, the politically correct gods don't apply. So if you want to stab a talk radio show host as he's walking by, fine. You want to beat your girlfriend? Fine. You want to use narcotics? Fine. Because anything goes at that address for some reason. Very, very strange circumstances, to say the least. But then some issues arise about how women are treated in the prisons in this province of Grand Ontario, they're forced to have vaccinations. Bet you didn't know that. I didn't know that either. Doesn't matter if you consent or you don't consent. So you're in a situation where you're vulnerable and weak. And what does the province of Ontario want to do? Stick you. Then there's another little issue about you're in a women's prison, right? You would assume, and Dad always told me about that word, ass, you and me. When you assume, you make an ass out of you and you make an ass out of me. Would you expect the male guards to be watching you shower? I wouldn't. I didn't think that was allowed in my day, but it seems to be allowed now in the politically correct Ontario, where the political correct gods don't apply anymore. You see, women are to be victimized and abused, even in the shelter of the Crown at the Vanier Detention Center. Isn't that fun? You get inoculated with poisons. You put on a good show for the male guards. So if you don't like that and you kind of block out their view with toilet paper, they take the toilet paper away and then you can't have any. And that's probably another nightmare in its own right. But see, this is Ontario. We have Dalton McGuinty as our premier, the man who steals money from various funds like e-health, where $1 billion just evaporates into thin air. And he has the nerve to say he's an honorable member of Parliament. And we have people who have the nerve to say that they're in the loyal opposition, in the NDP or the Conservative Party. Everybody has a lot of nerve, but no one does anything. So you can watch women shower and you can inoculate them and do all sorts of things to them. And if you just happen to be at the right politically correct address, you can get away with any violation of the criminal law known to mankind because it's allowed. No one cares, especially if you have diminished capacity. Then you're just useless eaters and in the fascist empire made to be used and abused at the delight of the state. What a wonderful world we have here in southern Ontario. But I understand the prison planet is expanding anywhere, so maybe we'll just have to call it Ontaristan or Torontostan or something like that so we catch up. But that's just one of the small little personal issues that turned into a much bigger issue as we see politically correct Ontario. But there was some good news, because when I bailed my friend out, I found a justice of the peace who was just a model of gentlemanly conduct, a thorough and complete person to sit on the bench. I was just absolutely amazed that he left outside the front door with everyone else as a member of a community and a society. He didn't have to hide or slink out the back door. He could walk out proudly out the front door. And there were a lot of people still waiting, the last few candidates, to get their bail. A lot of them were grandmothers with their grandchildren waiting for their daughters. And what did this justice of the peace do? He goes up to them and he gives them candy. I didn't think there were any left, because that's something I would have done when I wore a uniform. I would look after people and realize that the whole purpose of a society, of a community, is to restore it to health, to make it better. Not to stomp around in jackboots, waving machine guns and pointing them in people's faces, and having lackluster judges allow any atrocity against human rights, the Constitution, or the Bill of Rights to go unchallenged. A very, 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 very strange world we live in. But there's still a breath of hope. Thank you, Mr. Justice of the Peace. You are a gentleman, sir. If we can buzz up on the screen there, we'll just do a quickie on, how some of these nasty illustrations work. You see, in the old days, people could read and write. They could also draw pictures and compose beautiful music. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with this classic painting on the Sistine Chapel, Mercury's Messenger, and you see God touching Mercury and importing power into him. And then we see in the brushstrokes how this is concealed, the human brain. You see? There's a contact between your brain and God, according to the language that's concealed in this picture. And the pineal gland here